I went in 17 years of age. I had no idea what I wanted to do in the Navy. After taking an aptitude test, does this sound like this? Did it? Well, it was strictly guesswork. Next thing I know, I'm off to the radio school. And I came out as a radioman third class. I don't know what percentage of the students got ratings. But from there, we were assigned ships. And the Suwannee was my first assignment. And we were assigned to the Suwannee before it was even in commission. We had a guard. They used us as guards, 3 or 4 of us. Radar shack. I remember when the ships were being installed with radar.
Oh, yes.
And it was top secret. And there I am, 17 years old with a .45 guard in a radar shack. Didn't know what it was all about, but that was my first encounter or introduction to the Navy.
How about you, Mr. Hunter?
I got in when I was 17. I started college when I was 16, and I turned 17, and the war broke out, and I broke out of college, and I got in service. And I got on the Suwannee in San Diego. I believe that must have been around September, October '43.
Yeah, 43.
But I went through school in Navy Pier in Chicago. And when I got out of school, they sent me to Astoria, Oregon. And we stayed there, maybe 2 or 3 months, and went down to El Centro, California for night flying training, right in the desert. From there, we went to Los Alamitos, California, and from there aboard ship. And I served as an aviation metalsmith. I patched them up when they shot the holes in them. And I came out with aviation metalsmith first class. I got out and immediately following the war, the only way I could get off the ship was to take a discharge. I wanted to stay in, but I'd been on that ship long enough, so I got out. And then got in the Air Force and stayed till 65 and retired from the Air Force.
Wow. Impressive.
Very unusual.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. And talk a little bit about October 24th, 25th, and 26th. So what can y'all tell me? What do you remember?
Wow.
That day?
October 24th, the guns started shooting. We had 2 boys in my shop, or 3. One was on the Hornet when it was sunk. One was on the Wasp when it was sunk. 2 were on the Hornet. One of them was on the Hornet got behind the big bulkhead. He said, "This is the thickest thing in here. I'm getting behind here." And the blast just took his center of his body right out with it. And that day, I didn't get injured at all except a burn across my neck where they blew my helmet off and the strap burned me. The 8 of them in the shop, and 3 of us got out. But the next day, that day it wiped out everybody on the hangar deck and the shops around it just about. Next day I was on the hangar deck working up in the belly of an aircraft. And I heard the gun started shooting. I said, "I gotta get off the hangar deck." So I ran for the flight deck, and just as I got my hand on the ladder, the whole elevator came down and all a ball of fire. And I couldn't grab the elevator because my hand was dead. This hand I could use, but it was hurting. It had shrapnel in it too. That day, though, if I hadn't have been up in that plane, I'd have made it to the flight deck when it killed everybody up there that day. But I couldn't get out of there in time, so I missed out. So I came out, I think, very, very fortunate with just some shrapnel. And no life jacket, and they was already abandoning the ship. I got my way back to the fantail, and 2 corpsmen got a hold of my arm and pulled a piece of shrapnel out of there. And then they hung a 5-inch shell around me for a life jacket because I didn't have one. And they were already abandoning ship, but I didn't have to go down. They called them back aboard before then. We all feel fortunate to be one of the ones that's here.
So you remember that?
Well, vividly, the 25th and 26th. The 24th, you know, you're either at general quarters or off at general quarters at that time. But the 25th, of course, for the first 40 years till we had our reunion, I always thought it was the 24th and 25th, the 2 kamikaze days, which stand out vividly. But what I learned on our first reunion, it was the 25th and 26th.
It's 25th and 26th.
25th and 26th. All those years I was under a false impression it was 24th and 25th. But we were in general quarters, went to general quarters at 25th, and my general quarters station was on a catwalk, the base of the bridge, the YE room. It's a room with, they transmit signals straight up so the planes can hone in on a signal and land on the flight deck. And I'm looking at, and all hell had broke loose by then. And I'm watching the sister ship USS Santee off on our starboard side. And I'm watching a plane come down, straight out of the sun, straight down. And I'm watching all the way down, and it's 20s, 40 millimeters. It didn't stop that plane. Did you happen to see the plane coming down at all?
I was in my shop.
Okay, you was in the shop. Well, anyway, as he came down, I'm waiting for him to pull out and drop his bomb. Boom, he hits midship. And I thought, what in the hell is he doing? Why didn't he pull out? Well, it wasn't about 3 minutes later, we were rocked with a kamikaze. Now, unless you was in the immediate area, you wouldn't realize the damage was done. You know, we were forward at the bridge area, and I had to go back and see if I could retrieve a transmitter. I had to go aft, radio 2, right in the area where the kamikaze went through the flight deck, the hangar deck, and there's a radio shack there, the transmitting room. I couldn't get to the transmitting room. But in the process of getting there, it was night and day difference between forward and aft. Dead bodies all over the place. Couldn't believe it. Concussion, it just blew bodies apart. Unbelievable. Well, I got back up to near the bridge, and I must have been white as a sheet. And I said, what happened? Well, you couldn't tell much damage was done if you were in, unless you were in the right area. Well, we lasted that day. A lot of casualties, a lot of guys blowing off the ship. I didn't realize there were people blowing off the ship till the next day. What was happening, these guys, the first day, the hangar deck is a wide expanse. And there's ammunition parties involved in handling ammunition, bringing it up to the top deck for the gunners to use. But as the ship zigged and zagged, they'd run from side to side, port and starboard. They had wide open doors, and they could watch the battle going on, the planes coming down. Well, when the plane hits that flight deck and goes through and hits the hangar deck, concussion blew anybody standing near these doors right into the ocean, blew them out. In fact, Eric Kitzman was our memorial today was dedicated to Eric Kitzman. He was one of the fellows was blown out the first day. And the 26th, I don't think we were in general quarters. Do you remember that? When we got hit the second day?
Oh, no, we weren't.
Because I was in a radio shack, and my job at that time was copying the news, and we put out a newsletter every day. And I was copying the news, and all of a sudden, a big jolt, and of course you didn't know what it was unless you're topside to see what was happening. And all of a sudden, all hell broke loose, and you can hear people just beyond outside the doors hollering, run to port, run to starboard. And I turned around, and I couldn't find my life jacket, and there was a kapok jacket, so I put it on. At the time, I didn't realize how much I'd missed my waistline jacket. It was just a pneumatic type. You just you press the thing and it'll blow up by itself. A lot lighter, easier to handle. But I had this kapok on, the old-fashioned jacket. I got out of Radio Shack. I don't know how I did it. And I went down one flight of stairs, and boom, there was another explosion. I went up against a bulkhead. It tore my, right in my eyebrow, and the scar's still there. Blood was coming down. Pitch black, fire and smoke. And I couldn't believe it. I finally saw some daylight, and it was the bow of the ship. I went for daylight, and I went out. Of course, the first thing I did was put my hands to my stomach area. I thought my guts was hanging out. Concussion, I saw it the day before what concussion could do. Well, anyway, when I got on the bow, there must have been 100, 150 guys out on the bow, fire and smoke, and there was no water to fight it. And eventually one of the officers abandoned ship, and off we went from the bow. It must have been, from stories I've heard, a couple of hundred guys jumped off the bow. But in the process of jumping, I was told today it was a 50-foot jump. I can't believe it was that much of a jump, because at Nimitz Memorial, they had the Lexington, and they had different ships, and you could see the guys jumping from these decks. And I thought, my God, did I jump that high? Well, in the process of jumping with the jacket I had, you have to hit the water with your head tucked in, otherwise it jolts your neck. And you know, you're supposed to do a lot of things in the heat of the battle, which you don't do. But the one thing I do remember is move away from the ship and as fast as you can, otherwise there's screws back there. And you get caught under the screws, you're gone. I thought more about those screws than anything else. Oh, anyway, we got picked up by the destroyer, number 217, and of course I'll never forget that number. But I can remember the destroyers coming by and cutting the life rafts away for the guys to get onto, and many of the guys never got to the destroyer to get picked up, and they died right on the life raft. Burns, badly burned, or shrapnel, real bad shrapnel wounds.
Shock was probably
Shock,
cause
yeah,
of
shock.
most of it, most deaths.
And after 2 or 3 days, a lot of us got back to our ship, and the ones that couldn't make it, they took them down. I don't know how they went to base hospitals throughout the area. But this Eric Kitzman, the one that's responsible for our reunions, I start number 12, he's the one that was blown off the ship the first day. And he brought in the headlines from his local newspaper. And Eric Kitzman lost at sea. This was October 25, 1944. 44.
Yes.
He got blown over, and he got picked up, and they took him to a hospital, but nobody knew where the man was. He was one of many that was picked up in this matter and taken to hospitals. And then about a month later, another newspaper headline, Eric Kitzman found he was in a hospital, and the story turned out real nice. He passed away on us this past year, and his memorial was in his honor.
I wish I could have met him.
I believe that we're probably the only ship, the bridge was completely knocked out. They set up back midships on the flight deck, a little aft, 4 4x4s, and a tarp over those 4x4s, and a compass, and a wheel. And that's the way we came back to the States. And we pulled in Pearl Harbor, most impressive thing I've ever seen in my life. Every ship in that Pearl Harbor had them in Class A white standing attention saluting us. Now that was impressive.
That is impressive. Very neat. How did you? A lot of the men kind of get their memories or kind of coming back with each reunion. You know, like you were saying, some things you don't know, and then you start talking about it and realize where he was and you were and somebody else was.
This is number 12, and you never stop learning. If something that came up you've forgotten, or somebody remembered it, there's always somebody brings these stories back, and all of a sudden they refresh your memory, and you do recall these incidents. But I don't think there's any I want to really forget.
I wish I could.
Yeah, you can't. To this day, any sudden noise and jar, my whole body reacts, and you just can't. You just don't control those things. Never will, I don't think. Do you?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
You were just talking about the tornado.
Yeah, I just got through going through a tornado that wiped us out completely. And we had just gotten a closet, slammed the door of the closet, and the home blew up. It sounded just like that first kamikazes hit us.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, I never heard the freight train people read about, you know, hearing before a tornado. All it was that big explosion. And I said, well, I get through about 4 or 5 years ago having nightmares of the Suwannee getting hit, and then I've got a tornado going on. So it brought back vivid memories.
How do you deal with the memories of the war?
I left those slides down there a while ago. It got just a little bit more than I could take, and I just got up and left. I don't know what went on after I left, but
Yeah.
it was.
The photographer, ship's photographer, brought in his personal collection of photos, which he brought in. And some were pretty gory, you know, arms and legs separated.
I saw people hanging over
Yeah.
railings with their
But my
half
vision,
the body gone and laying there going like this, you know.
the vision I have will never get out of my mind is, I bunked the bakers and cooks were in the same division as, they slept in the same compartment. It was below the waterline. Of course, when general quarters went on, you got out as fast as you could. Anything below the waterline, and not only that, you were court-martialed if you didn't get out of that your bunk and go topside. You had to dog hatches down to protect the ship if it did take a torpedo. But the guy alongside me, when I went back aft to try to retrieve a transmitter, who do I run into but this bunkmate? And he's laying on his back, and he's looking up at me, and I could read his lips, water. He wanted water. But I don't think he lived more than a few more minutes after he said that. There was no water to be had anyplace. But he was blown wide open. Now that vision I will never forget.
The officers' wardroom, which was the dining room, was all the tables were filled with victims, injured. And a day or two later, after we was trying to get away from that area to come back, a school of porpoises was sighted, and they blew general quarters. They thought it was submarines. And when they blew general quarters, there's quite a few of those guys that got off of that table from shock and just died right there. And they had made it already, you know, that long. But that little bit shoved them over the side.
How long before y'all got, I understand y'all took about 30 days to get back?
Ooh,
And then-
at least.
We came back to Bremerton.
Uh-huh.
Ship had major overhaul. Instruction, they had pictures sent in of the damage. Naturally, they had an idea how serious the damage was and how long it would take. But I can remember going home, and they gave us 20 days?
2 20-day leaves.
2 20-day leaves after.
You know, we got one, and then the
Yeah.
other group got one. You know, things
And,
like this.
We got back, and that ship was ready to go, and I don't think we were ready to go. The ship was ready to go. And from there we went to Okinawa, and the Okinawa campaign cost us more Navy ships than was unbelievable. You know, we were within range of Japan,
Oh, yes.
200, 300 miles.
We were actually past Japan.
Yeah.
Okinawa was further west than Japan was.
But the
it's
idea
south.
of Japan being right in our backyard was kind of scary. And you looked up and you'd see Mount Fuji, like it was next door. But I always felt like they shouldn't have sent the crew back. I don't think we were ready to handle. Did you go back? I don't think we were ready.
I know I was.
Don't you agree?
I know I was.
I mean, once you see it, I don't think you're ever
They talk
ready
about
for
a
another one.
seasoned veteran. I was a lot braver before we got hit and
Yeah.
injured than I was afterwards.
Yeah, right.
What were your thoughts getting back on the ship?
Back and going out. Well, there's things you have to do.
We just knew we had to do it.
You had to do it. But I've talked to a lot of people today, and I said, "What did you do when you got back?" We went back into the battle zone.
Yeah.
Well, after what all you guys went through, I don't think you should have gone back. But I guess it was the critical time of the war, and it had to be done, I guess. So we went back out. We went back.
We picked up about, what was it, 150 or 200 new men, in Seattle, going down to San Francisco to pick up our planes. And we got in the worst storm it had been since about 1906 on the Pacific coast going down. Some small carriers broke up, the Kaiser jobs. They broke up in that storm. And we had those new men. They had buckets tied to their cots, using those buckets, and water was a foot deep in the compartments, sloshing up with all their stuff they was adding to it, and they was praying the ship would sink, and we were all, praying to stay afloat because we weren't sick, but it got mighty dangerous.
Yeah, we had a radioman. He never went to chow till we hit Honolulu. I think we stopped at Honolulu. He never ate one time going over. That's how sick he was.
Goodness.
Oh, some strange things happened.
The,
After we got hit and started back out, we got to Honolulu, and we was playing a game of pinochle in my shop. And this one guy, he'd got a little shrapnel in his arm right about in here. And the guy said, "Doggone it, Ernie, either bid or pass." He said, "These are my cards, I'll play them as I want to." And he put them down like that and keeled right over. And I caught him in my arms. I dropped him down to the deck. I jumped over him and went to sick bay and got a medic. And before he got there, that guy died with a blood clot. He had turned purple, just like that. Right in the middle of And this was after he'd been on leave. Another real humorous story, though. Some of our group got the 20-day leave. I took the second 20-day leave so I could be home Christmas and New Year's. This one guy came back from Admire, Kansas, 4 days before his leave was up. I said, "Best, why are you coming back so early?" He said he was walking down the street in Admire, Kansas, and 4 or 5 old men sitting on the porch rocking. "Hey, son, where you been?" He said, "Pacific." "How many Germans you shoot?" He had enough of that, so he came back. He said he couldn't put up with that.
What's it been like for you to be able to meet again with the men of the Suwannee each year?
It means everything to me.
Yeah. Our last 12 years, it's almost a new type lifestyle for most of us. I've been all 12, and I'm sure Mr. Hunter might have been all 12.
I missed one.
Yeah. And we reserve that a week to 2 weeks every year since 1988. Of course, it almost fell into a perfect pattern where most people were retiring in 86, 87, 88.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to contend with having to go back to work anymore.
That's why we liked that Eric Kissman so much. He organized the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
And our attendance is good. We're losing a veteran. We're losing them every
every
month,
year.
I think.
we're the age that we just hope we'll be here next year.
Yeah, I went in when I was 17. I didn't realize you went in when you were 17.
Yeah.
Now, you stayed on the ship until
To the end, yeah. Once we got on at Norfolk, I was 17. I never did get off till I came back from Japan, which I think probably unusual. I would say at least 80% of the crew would have turned over. I must have been a real important guy.
I'll tell you another little incident. While Nagasaki was still burning and smoldering from the atomic bomb, they sent us in there. We got a tour over it in 6x trucks, and some of our men from the Suwannee was on detail out there helping. And they'd never heard about fallout, radiation, things like that at that time. And I'm pretty sure that some of our men got pretty well paying for it.
Yeah. I went through it, and I ended up with a cancer. I was 42 years old. Fortunately, I was able to successfully get rid of it. But the last few years, I've had cancer various parts of my face. But I often wonder how many people that went through Nagasaki ended up with cancer. And
Never being related to it.
Yeah, cancer related. But I'll bet you it's a pretty high percentage.
And they tried to deny that we had been there. But some of our group got together about, when was it? Right before San Diego, wasn't it?
Yeah, about 3
Before
years.
we went to San Diego 3 or 4 years ago. And finally got Washington to admit that we went through that mess.
Yeah, they're afraid of all these claims, future claims. But if they wait long enough, there won't be anybody putting any more claims
Which is
in.
probably what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
One thing, not a thing. So I knew we were going off that catapult. I knew it was going to be a sudden charge. So I just says, I'll hook my hands like this behind the seat. There was a procedure. There was a bar right here in front of you. You were supposed to put your head in that and hold that. But I was here
Was this TBF or TBF?
when they launched us off.
Yeah.
I took double somerset
Yeah,
right back on
yeah,
that 30
yeah.
caliber machine gun in his back
Yeah,
of me and knocked me about half out. And the guy in the turret, 50 caliber operator,
Yeah.
he looked down and he told the pilot, said, I think we lost a man. He couldn't find me anywhere. And I crawled back up there. But I got with him before we landed to see what position I should be.
We'll double check on that. What would you like for people to remember about your service during the war?
You know, I thought we went to war and my kids wouldn't have to worry about future war. But it happened a lot sooner than I could ever believe it was going to happen. My son was 16, 17, all of a sudden, with Korea, he had to sign up, and it wasn't exactly a popular war. And I never thought that 20-year span would be in another major confrontation. But he ended up going to a college, and he was deferred, and he was fortunate that he wasn't placed in a position Well, I volunteered, so I can't say too much about this.
Yeah.
But I didn't want him to go through what I'd gone through. Under right condition, right war, I'd be the first man to say, "Go ahead." But that wasn't a very popular confrontation.
I got in the Air Force. First thing I had to do after that was Berlin airlift. The Cold War. I came back from there, and about 10 months later, Korea broke out. So over there I went for 60 days TDY in August of 50. March of 52, that 60 days, I got to come home. It stretched out a little bit. And then the Vietnam mess started. I had already cleared my base for Turkey. They called me at midnight that night, says, we were supposed to leave the following Tuesday, and this was Thursday night. They said, bring your clothes with you. We're not going to Turkey. That's when Vietnam started. So we went over there and came back about 4 or 5 months later. And then 2 months later, my boss says, give me a list of the people to relieve the outfit that's over there now. I gave him a list. He said, your name's not on here. I said, I'm going to give somebody else a chance to go. His whole career, he'd spent 3 weeks away from his family. So I put in my retirement papers, and he had to go instead of me. And he had to spend a full tour, drop down to about 115 pounds. But I went to see him in Reading, Pennsylvania after we both retired. He said, boy, you pulled one on me. I said, no, you tried to pull one on me. But my son got all shot up in Vietnam. Just like he says, it's a terrible thing. And it doesn't look like it's going to get any better soon.
Some of the men have said that they've used humor to kind of, y'all had a lot of good times.
That's all you can do.
And a lot of interesting stories aside from those 3 hard days.
Yeah, yeah.
That there was a lot of bonding and
a lot of bonding. Yeah.
yeah.
These reunions have a lot of bonding that have gone. Like your dad, I've been to his house. Your granddad.
Mm-hmm.
They've been to my house. They've been to my daughter's house in California, on the way from Bremerton going south. There's a stopover area, and you end up with a lot of friendships. And I don't know how many have visited you. Probably quite a few.
Oh yes.
But I've had at least 5 to 10 veterans stop over and maybe spend a night or 2 or 3.
We had the reunion last year. He put it on in Pittsburgh. That was one of the best ones we ever had.
Yeah.
We sure enjoyed it. I've driven to every one of them. I haven't flown to any of them.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
All right.
I've driven to all of them.
Well, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.